Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September 8, 2021 Centralina Regional Council Executive Board. I want to welcome everyone for joining us. Something that's not in your agenda. I hope you looked at your agenda pack. We have a lot to cover, but something that's not in there, I just want to make sure everyone realizes this. Today is William Morgan's birthday. He's our Centralina Regional Council treasurer. Very important job with our council, and it's his birthday. So please join me in wishing him a happy birthday. Now, if you want this meeting to end early, I will sing. But since we got a lot to cover, we'll be here for just a little while. I will not sing, but William Morgan, happy birthday from everyone here at Centralina Regional Council, and of course, everyone on our executive board joining us. So we appreciate that. We will not ask your age. So we'll move on now. So as always, we need to go over this. To help us move through the agenda more efficiently, please remain muted, except when making a motion, a second, or voting, or posing a question or comment. Be sure to state your name for the record when making a motion, a second, or when speaking. So Kelly Weston, our clerk, has to keep a record of that, so please state your name. We've been monitoring attendance as board members have joined Zoom. In the interest of time, we will not call the names of board members participating via computer, since your names were recorded when you logged into the meeting and are displayed in the participant list. Kelly will call the names of board members whose names are not shown on the list. It is to be called in alphabetical order by last name. I will now ask our clerk, Kelly Weston, to call the roll.
Mr. Chairman. Karen Alexander. Dolores Chambers.
Present.
Thank you. Bill Feather. Bob Hovis. Corinthia Lewis Lemon. Jean Halp.
Kelly, Commissioner Halp is on. He just messaged me.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, we do have quorum.
We do have a quorum. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Well, now I ask for a moment of silence. Please join me, please, just for a moment of silence. Thank you. With no amendments to the agenda, I have to do some comments regarding the consent agenda. If you'll please follow along with me. The consent agenda includes a request to approve the FY22 sponsor agreement and funding for the Senior Community Services Employment Program, which is a community service and work-based job training program for older adults. The Centralina Area Agency on Aging has provided services through SCSEP for over 35 years. The consent agenda also includes a request to approve the FY22 contract with Centralina's managed IT services vendor. There is no change in the contract amount for this year. So those who were with us last year, remember we went through this, talked about it, and so it's the same as last time. No changes. Contract's the same, amount's the same. So if I could please have a motion.
Motion to approve the consent agenda, Larkin Eggleston.
Thank you, Councilman Eggleston. Do I have a second?
Second, Troy Selberg.
Thank you, Councilman Selberg. We have a motion and a second. I'll now ask the clerk to call the roll for approval.
Peter Ashuto.
Yes.
Dolores Chambers.
Present. Yes.
Bobby Compton.
Yes.
Kathy Davis.
Yes.
Larkin Eggleston.
Yes.
Jean Halp. Jay McCosh.
Yes.
William Morgan.
Yes, ma'am. And by the way, I don't know why my camera's not working, but at 58 years old, you don't want to see my wrinkled face anyway.
Troy Selberg.
Yes.
Lynn Shu.
Yes.
Jennifer Stepp.
You wouldn't unmute, yes.
Amelia Stinson Wesley.
Yes.
David Williams.
Yes.
Jarvis Woodburn.
Yes.
Hey, Kelly, Commissioner Haupt is somehow muted on his
Can you hear me
end.
now?
Oh, we can hear you now. There we go.
Okay, I was a yes. I apologize. I was muted.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, that was unanimous.
Thank you. Motion passes. Thank you, Commissioner Howe, for joining us and getting off that. Motion passes. Move on to item number 4, Federal Relations Update and Annual Report. I got something on that. Let's see. On item 4. Leslie Mazingo will present an update on federal relations activities, including the performance report for June through August, and the Federal Relations Annual Report for activities for July 2020 through July 2021. We'll consider the performance report and the Federal Relations Annual Report in one motion at the conclusion of her presentation. So now, Leslie Mazingo, you're on the line. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And good evening, everyone. As the chairman mentioned, you have in your packet the regular performance report that we do at all of the meetings for the previous months. This one's, covers a few more months because of the summer schedule. So you've got that June to August, as he mentioned, and then the annual report we do each year to show you, again, sort of the accomplishments, taking everything from all of those performance reports and then putting them into one final, annual report so that you can see some of the things that we really feel like are the biggest highlights of the year. As usual, I won't go through every item. There's not enough time, and it's there for you to read and digest and to ask questions. I'm always happy to answer questions this evening or even afterwards if you see something that you would like to know more about. But for the purposes of discussion, I guess the items that I really wanted to call to your attention from the annual report perspective is when we started, when Centralina decided to start a federal advocacy program a number of years ago, I honestly literally started with going around and explaining to congressional offices what COGS were, what regional councils were, how that differs, what the difference was from that to a planning organization like an MPO. And so we spent a lot of time that first year really just getting people to understand, the role that you play, and also separating or highlighting how Centralina was different, from other COGs in terms of not just size, but the way, your innovative approach and how many different, urban and rural MPOs that you have to coordinate between, all the great work that Michelle does with, numerous interests in bringing them together for one common purpose. And so we spent a lot of time, doing the foundation, and over the years, each year we kind of see a little bit more and a little bit more in terms of awareness, and staff change. So sometimes, we have to go back and maybe update some staff, but the members, have for the most part remained the same. And we see them now when we make a call or we come in, not only do we get that sort of nod, like, hey, good to see you guys again. What are you working on? How can I help? But they're being proactive as well. So a couple of things that I wanted to give you an example of things that I worked on that I think were real game changers for us. In terms of those relations and also projects that we've been working on, is you might, so we've had, for example, this year, we've had the Executive Office of the President, White House Intergovernmental, speak to our group. We have had Senator Tillis's office the first time, and I literally have been working on this for like 5 years or more, but Senator Tillis had agreed to meet with us in person at the first meeting. As we know, that didn't work out. It had to be virtual. But the fact that when we put the request in for a meeting, we got a response that Senator Tillis, would love to attend. That's a real step forward. And the fact that his staff all came and met with us, I think, again, is indicative of the respect that you all have as experts for your region. Some other things that you might not be aware of is Congresswoman Adams' office was looking to set up an event, and she needed some expertise and panelists for this event that she was going to do. And her chief of staff, her district director, actually contacted Centralina, Linda's department in particular, and said, I really want y'all to be part of this aging discussion and how ARP services are available and so forth, and waited to schedule the date until after she could talk with Linda and make sure those were dates that could work for them. So again, having that expertise and being known as a great resource for these offices. In addition, so this year, Congresswoman Fox, Virginia Fox, was new to our region. And so when I put some requests in for time with her, we actually had a number of requests. We had the regular fall advocacy that we're right in the middle of as we speak, and some of you have already participated in those meetings. But we had the fall advocacy, we had a workforce development board meeting that we wanted her to do, and then we had some additional staff level work we were trying to finish up, and so she ended up picking up the phone and calling me and saying, "Oh, I'm really glad to hear you working for Centralina. You tell me more about this so I can decide how to space these meetings out and which meetings should we do first and how do we get them all in." So to me, that made an impression that she wanted to reach out and find out more with a personal call. And then last but certainly not least, without hesitation, we had folks again submit our annual appropriations language to give leverage to regional projects when they're looking at competitive grants. So to always consider those equally eligible along with local governments, and then submitted our congressionally directed spending, our member specific requests. Again, no hesitation. So we're not having to go back and educate someone and tell them why we're so great. They're like, yeah, what can we do? How can we help? So all of these ways, the work is never done. As I said, you always have to continue to build on those relationships, bring in new projects and bring in new areas where members of Congress can help. And certainly again, during ARP, we were able to provide a lot of input in terms of what local governments needed as they were developing that legislation. And it was, it was a tough battle to get support for the local relief funds. And that was an effort by lots of groups nationwide, certainly not our own alone, but we certainly played a role in that. So I feel like things are going really well. Looking forward to this next year and what great new accomplishments that we can make. And I will pause there to see if I can answer any questions about what's in the report or otherwise.
Thank you, Leslie. Anyone have any questions for Leslie regarding federal relations, the update or the annual report? Or anything she has reported on? I've got one, Leslie. Earlier, just when you started speaking, you said you set out to explain what COGS are, regional councils are. I find that amazing that they don't know. I'm staggered by that. I would have thought the areas in which they represent, whether it's district or the entire area, state, that they would already know what the ones do, where they're from. I just find that amazing that you have to explain that to them.
And you remember too that, and I will say that it did differ depending on the member of Congress to some level, but really we had a lot of questions, I think, from members as well, sort of some help me understand what you all are working on or how this all fits in. But the staff, the staff on Capitol Hill, again, there is turnover. Sometimes, you've got younger staff in charge of the issues initially. And sometimes they're not always from North Carolina, but the COGS are all over the nation. And to be honest, I think it's just that they're really, up until Centralina took on this role, I don't know that folks had been, there's a national association and they do a pretty good job. I'm not diminishing what they do, but within our own delegation, I don't know that anybody had really been as proactive as you all have been. And I wanted to point out that I think that has made a real difference.
That's great to hear. Good. I'm glad you let us know that, because I think we're going in the right direction, doing the right thing as far as our elected officials in Washington go. That's good. Any other comments or questions for Leslie while we have her? From anyone on the board? Leslie, thank you for your time and all your information. We do need a motion to accept Strategic Consulting Performance Report for June through August and the annual report of federal relations activities for July 2020 through June of 2021. That's a lot of information. So we need a motion and a second on that, please.
Motion to approve, Gene House.
Thank you, Commissioner
I
Lynch.
second. I second.
Thank you, Dolores Chambers. Thank you. I do have a motion and a second. I'll now ask Kelly West, our clerk, to call the roll to get a pass or a fail.
Peter Ashuta,
Yes.
Dolores Chambers,
Yes.
Bobby Compton,
Yes.
Kathy Davis,
Yes.
Larkin Eggleston,
Yes.
Gene Haupt,
Yes.
Jay McCosh,
Yes.
William Morgan,
Yeah.
Troy Selberg,
Yes.
Lynn Shu,
Yes.
Jennifer Stepp,
Yes.
Amelia Stinson Wesley,
Yes.
David Williams,
Yes.
Jarvis Woodburn.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, that was unanimous.
Thank you, Kelly. The motion does pass. And Leslie, again, thank you for all your work, conversations, being our liaison, and just being our person in Washington that we can go to, rely on, get the information from with all our elected officials throughout the state. So I thank you very much for that. We'll now
Thank you,
move to item.
Thank you,
sorry?
Mr. Chairman. I just want to say thank you and thank you all, for the opportunity to continue to work for you. And one final plug, I'm sorry, we're continuing with fall advocacy meetings. Some are still being scheduled, so watch for those in your inbox. The more people that attend, the better the meetings. They come by email from Kelly with invitations, and those are forthcoming in September. So just want to put that plug in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that, Leslie. Thank you. No, on our meetings we've had, we've been very successful with that in the past. I know I have for who I met with. So it's very good. I'm glad you mentioned it as a reminder. So we'll be getting that soon, I'm sure. Thank you so much. Item 5 is another relations update. However, this is out of Raleigh. So our Executive Director, Geraldine Gardner, will present that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. Kelly, you can go to the next slide. Actually, go back one, sorry. I just want to take a moment to provide you all with an update in general about our Raleigh relations strategy, and then want to spend the majority of my time talking about the NC Radar project. In terms of our Raleigh relations strategy in general, we've been pursuing that on a number of fronts. Kelly's been working hand in hand with Chris Wall, who is our consultant, to build relationships with our delegation. We've had a lot of engagement related to the Connect Beyond project, and we'll continue to build that work and build those connections as we get deeper into the fall and before they go on recess. Another area that we've been really strengthening our relationships and collaborating with the state government side is on the American Rescue Plan Act implementation and specifically the local government relief funds. We're building a very strong relationship with the NC Pro office, who is in charge of distributing those funds to the smaller units of local government. We're going to be working with them on a little bit of a pilot project around data, and have invited them to attend our upcoming regional managers group. It's really important that they know we're a resource to them. We're kind of ears on the ground at how our local governments are managing these funds, and we can be a conduit from your communities to their office for resources and information. So that's been an exciting partnership that's very much in development. Another thing, we have lots of historically strong relationships with NC Commerce through David's work on workforce and Health and Human Services and Department of Aging and Adult Services through Linda's work. But there are some new offices in the governor's administration, like the Office of Strategic Partnerships. They're working to build a relationship with. They focus on philanthropic resources and connecting local governments to new grant work and grant opportunities. So there's some exciting work there that we're building on. So now to the radar. Kelly, you can move ahead one. So just as a reminder, or for some of our new delegates, this was a project that surfaced probably about, I would say, almost 2 years ago at this point. I'm thinking about our meeting where we had Brad Panovich come in and talk to the board. Basically, the highlight or the headline is that there's a gap in our radar in this area, as well as the Piedmont Triad and the Western Piedmont area, that affects over half the population of the state. It affects the ability to forecast low-level tornadoes and rain events. And there's some pretty significant implications for emergency management and being able to forecast weather events and respond to emergencies. So a group of weathermen and emergency managers have been advocating to fill this gap, to get an additional radar station or stations in our region. You can see the map here that shows the big hole in the middle of where that coverage is missing. And it's been a great opportunity for the three councils of governments, ourselves, the Western Piedmont and Piedmont Triad, to work together, since all of our areas are impacted, to see if we can try to solve this challenge. So there's been a number of things that we've been doing, albeit slow, since the last time we talked about this. We've been advocating for direct funding from the General Assembly. So Chris Wall worked with us to connect with Representative Torbett. The good news is that there is legislation or there's language in the current budget bill that's being discussed right now to direct the Department of Emergency Management to work with the COGS to conduct a feasibility study to solve this problem. The challenge is there's no funding associated with it. But Chris reports that there is plenty of money in the Department of Public Safety and Emergency Management's budget. So there might be some additional advocacy that we need to do to make sure that this stays on their front burner. But the direction is there, which is great. So that's a win. The COGS, as a consortium, we released an RFP to see if we could find some experts, some weather experts and technical experts to do a feasibility assessment. We need to figure out, where these radar stations go, what type. I've learned a lot about radar that I have never learned before. There's lots of different types that have different costs and things associated with them. So we did get a response from one of our universities. Two of our universities want to collaborate together. So that's kind of our plan B. If the state doesn't move forward in funding, then there's the opportunity for us to self-fund this feasibility assessment. But ultimately, at the end of the day, after doing a lot of studies, we need construction funding. So we're looking at the BRIC program. This is a federal program under FEMA called Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities. But we have to team up with the state on this. It's not something we can apply for on our own. So we're looking at options. We're continuing to collaborate with our federal delegation. Leslie's been a great help at that. And also our Senate offices that continue to have a keen interest in this issue. And Kelly, I think there's one more slide. Yeah, so that's the language that's in the budget, just to be a little bit more specific. And our two next steps, we're going to keep up the pressure on our delegation to make sure that this language stays in. So any help that our delegates want to lend us in terms of your connections to make sure this remains in. And once it does pass, we're going to continue to work and advocate with emergency management to fund the study and execute the study in collaboration with us. But the plan B, as I mentioned, if they delay and they don't allocate funding, we want to continue to make progress. And that would require us to self-fund the study, which would be approximately $60,000 split across the three COGS. So that's where we stand. I'm happy to answer any questions. And also, if there are any of you that have a really keen interest in this, that want to work with Kelly and I on the project and some of the follow-up, please let me know. And we're happy to leverage your interest and connections and get this project moving.
Thank you, Geraldine. Any questions or comments for our executive director? We were to see this as information, but she wants us to provide feedback, as she asked. So any comments or questions for her? I just find it amazing, the map you showed and the big hole in the middle is the largest city in the state. And I know they have that little Doppler thing over off Batesford Road or somewhere. Councilman Eggleston could correct me about the location, but somewhere down there that's very small, doesn't do what those other red dots on the map did. I'm just shocked that we don't have the coverage we have here. As it was stated, over 1/2 the population, the largest city in the state, and the most populated region, that's to be Centralina Regional Council, is very poorly monitored with weather. So very sad. So I hope we can do that with Leslie still on the line hearing this, then she can help us federally. And then we're doing what we can here. And I applaud the Centralina Regional Council staff with Geraldine Gardner and Kelly Weston and others. This has been going on off and on for about 2 years. And I asked Geraldine about it periodically. How's it going? It's just very slow steps, but we are making progress with it. So I hope we do have something come from this. So again, anybody interested in joining us or any further feedback, please let Geraldine Gardner know or Kelly Weston know, please, here at Centralina. Great information. Thank you. With no other comments, we'll go to item 6, Connect Beyond Endorsement Process Discussion. I'd like to recognize Michelle to start the presentation, and then Jason Wager is also present. So Michelle, on the Connect Beyond Endorsement.
Good evening and thank you. Last month, we provided a full presentation on the Connect Beyond recommendations to the board, and that board will be taking action in October on the plan. Tonight, what we'd like to do is just provide an update on Centralina's role, anticipated role in plan implementation, and really to get your feedback on how we want to engage the full board in October as they get ready to take action. And Kelly, can you advance the slides? Thank you. Just as a reminder, after 17 months of technical work with the great participation of many of you and your staff, we've developed 5 mobility moves from the plan that we will need to make good on to advance mobility within the region. And that's creating mobility-friendly places, expanding choices in mobility, strengthening those urban to rural connections, building a better bus network, and investing in strategic mobility corridors. Next slide, please. And a few of the highlights of the plan, as you will recall, are, first of all, the high-capacity transit corridors, which would include commuter rail, light rail, or bus rapid transit and express bus, but also those emerging mobility corridors, really all those in-between corridors that really are going to be instrumental in providing connections between the urban, suburban, and rural areas. And then our mobility hubs. Mobility hubs are really the core of this plan. They provide a way for every community to invest in their core, in their downtowns, in their commercial areas, in their employment areas, to really invest in not only transit type facilities, but also the bike and the pedestrian and the trail networks that create that full mobility synergy that we're all looking for in the region. Next slide. And as you will recall, we developed several kind of move forward options. The plan is, it's very important that we have those moving forward ideas in mind now, and we do. We had a committee that looked at how we're going to work together and how we're going to fund the plan. And first and foremost, they said, you know what, it's really important that we have flexibility in how we do this, that we look at a 2-pronged approach in terms of regional collaboration. Let's start out with just some of those agreements and maximizing our current organizational cooperative abilities. But then also let's look at a more long-term approach in terms of, maybe there is a need for either an enhanced or a new institution that really looks at how we have a transit system that crosses county lines. Next slide. And then in terms of funding, obviously all across the region, our stakeholders have said that this is something we need to work together on. Each community is different. They're at a different place. That's expected and welcomed. Each community needs to move forward at the pace that they feel comfortable with. And that's a real key component of this plan is that flexibility. So also on funding, we need to make sure that we're maximizing what's out there. If there are some, what I'll call shovel-ready projects that move towards implementing this plan, perhaps some of the federal funding that's coming down now and in the next few years could actually go towards that implementation. We need to advocate to the state legislature, or I should say legislatures, North Carolina, South Carolina, really with one unified voice. We need to go together on these major issues and then make sure that we have clarity about what our priorities are and what we're going to work together on as a region. Next slide. And so we have put in place some structures to think through how we do the early implementation measures. And so some people have said, is this an org chart? It looks like an org chart, but it's not another layer. It's basically anticipating each of our partner organizations' strengths and making sure that they are aware of the elements of this plan that will be coming their way for implementation. So in other words, Centralina will continue to be the convener that we have always been for the last 50 years. CATS and the MPOs will be looking at some of those transportation issues. And then some of the new things that are coming out of this plan related to coordination and regional approaches, Centralina certainly will be in the lead there. Next slide. So really one of the key things we're talking about today is just how we're going to anticipate the full board taking action in October. And so there are these things on the slide now are really what we want to get through. We want to make sure that in October that the board comes away with basically understanding the key components of the vision so that they will feel secure in endorsing the plan, making sure that they have the support that they need and support Centralina and as part of the process of implementation, and then making sure we get endorsement for implementation as a priority for Centralina. I'm gonna pause there right before I turn it over to Jason to kind of talk through this, and just note that we have been meeting all across the region to kind of roll out these recommendations. So even though this is a short week, we've already met with the City of Charlotte City Council. We've met with the Gaston Cleveland Lincoln MPO. We had a meeting this afternoon in person with all the cities in the county, in Gaston County, their managers and their mayors, huge group that we met with over there. And we will be repeating that through all of the Centralina counties really in the next couple of weeks. So just wanted to let you know that outreach has been happening and we're getting really good feedback. And in fact, some communities are already saying, hey, these are the pieces that we want to take from this plan and we want to move forward. And that's a really good sign. So next slide, and Jason, I'll turn it over to you for the discussion component.
All right, thank you very much, Michelle. And yeah, as described, we want to talk a little bit about the mechanics and what to expect in next month's meeting, and really wanted to get your input and thoughts on the best approach. So getting right down into the nitty gritty of the motion that would be offered, and we've got a couple of proposals here that we wanted to throw in front of you, and then see what you had your thoughts on those. So one motion is simply adopting the plan, including its recommendations. So that includes the full complement of recommendations that are encompassed within those key mobility moves that Michelle just alluded to. And in addition, there are elements of those funding and partnerships as well to make sure that we move things forward. So that's sort of one motion. And then another, which takes things maybe to a little bit more of an explicit level, is the same thing: adopting the plan, including the recommendations, and endorsing Centralina Regional Council's role as that Connect Beyond implementation manager. So as Michelle mentioned about the role as convener and collaborator around the region, really being sure and more explicit in the adoption of the plan, that Centralina staff would have a particular role, and furthermore, there's endorsement more or less of the work plan that as the work plan is put together and staff is out doing these things, that's been backed up by the board as well and asked for and requested. So I think that we want to maybe pause there, and happy to talk about other variations or alternatives, and certainly can refer to some of the things already in our overall Centralina Regional Council work plan that relate to Connect Beyond. But maybe stop there and see about your reactions and just other considerations as this goes to the Board of Delegates October 13th. And if folks prefer to put thoughts into the chat, that's perfectly fine too. We'll monitor that.
Thank you, Michelle and Jason. Any questions or comments? Please let them know. I mean, they're on the line waiting, or as Jason said, use the chat room. Michelle, I have one question. You mentioned outreach, just all including the York and Lancaster area, reaching out to our South Carolina neighbors.
So the outreach there has really been through their MPO, the Rock Hill Fort Mill Area Transportation Study. And that's the way they prefer it. Since those communities are not within our Council of Governments, they prefer to receive their information and get their inputs through that official organization down there. So we've provided information, we provided, presentation materials. A lot of times we're there, but they prefer to do the presentations, and that's okay.
And this is a lot of information, and we still have a couple new faces on our executive board, and this has been going on for quite some time. It's very intense. After this meeting, before, of course, the October meeting, and I want to ask our executive director and our clerk, Kelly Weston, could this information be sent out to executive board members to review, to digest? Because there's 2 motions that's going to be coming up in October, and so everyone will understand what we're making a motion for and what they're approving or disapproving, whatever the case may be. So that should be sent out to all of us sometime after this meeting for us to review. So any other comments from our executive board?
Just one quick note on that, Chairman, while our delegates are preparing their feedback to the decision we have up for you all today, the recommendations have been out, and we've circulated that information as a follow-up to our August meeting. The full plan, kind of like the entire thing, will be out on Monday.
Okay.
So we will make sure that is out. And I think what we intend to do following this meeting is, when we have a clear understanding of which motion option you all as an executive board feel comfortable proposing, we'll prepare a package in advance. Kelly sends out information well in advance, but we'll do even more in advance, saying, here's what you should be prepared to vote on, so that's really clear and transparent for folks. So just once again, the first motion option is adopting the plan and its recommendations. The difference between A and B is just a little bit more of an explicit role for Centralina in the implementation process, and just a point of view on why I think this is important and why Jason and Michelle think this is important. Our natural role is a regional convener and kind of creating a platform for people to come together. This process and the plan is so complex, and there are so many players. Yes. I think we just want to be a little bit more assertive in our role, and so that we can ensure that implementation happens. And that's delicate because we don't want to seem bossy, right? We want to do this with sort of love and caring and communal sort of approach. But at some point, someone needs to step forward and say, we're pushing this forward. And a city council member from one of our jurisdictions says, we know you're the organization, but we just need to know you're the organization. And I think having the board set this charge for us will be very helpful. So we'd love to hear any feedback that the board has on these 2 motion options, or an alternative if you think that's a bridge too far.
Thank you, Geraldine. It sounds like on my comment, the Centralina Regional Council is well ahead of things and getting information out, or what the plan is for the upcoming days before our meeting.
Yeah, and while folks are thinking about maybe some of their reactions to maybe which way you would lean in terms of how the Board of Delegates would prefer to receive this, I'll mention, we'll share in just a second some dates, such as what Geraldine just mentioned. And also, one of the things that we've been up to is meeting with, on a county by county basis, county managers and board delegates. So thank you to Commissioner Woodburn. Just this week we met, and it was actually something he brought up at a past meeting where there was a need really for targeted information on a county basis. And so we now have those packets prepared, and we're sharing those as part of those meetings. So I guess just adding to the mix, Mr. Chairman, that will also help folks with kind of seeing, what's this really mean for my local area. We really would hope that that'll serve in that way. So it looks like we've got one comment. Do you have, and this is from Commissioner Shu, do you have an anticipated cost for this project, and where do the regional partners come into play? Yeah, that's the big question. I think what we've found is because there are so many sub-elements, the recommendations themselves make up several different activities, each with their own cost and their own timeline. We've focused, and you saw that organizational chart looking figure. That is really what's coming up, what we anticipate is coming up in the next 3 years. So that certainly will be the items that we look at. And those will need, of course, to be assigned some sort of cost and look at what even the geography might be. Some are truly regional discussions. Others might be assigned on an MPO by MPO basis, or for that matter, an even community by community basis. So we do not have an anticipated cost across all of those items. And in fact, one of the early things that we'll want to do as part of the funding conversation is to start some of those detailed analyses, whether we're talking about high capacity transit or maybe some regional scheduling, shared fare opportunities, you name it. We'll want to start analyzing what those costs would be. Right now, we see this as setting out that bigger vision that we can all get on board with and say, yeah, we like that. We're behind that. And from there, we can start zeroing in on what our priorities are and assigning costs. Does that help answer the question?
I think it did, Jason. It's very thorough for the question. And again, cost is a factor. That's in everybody's minds regarding any type of project, especially this one, as large as it is. Any further comments, feedback for our Centralina staff? For Michelle or
This
Jason?
is Jarvis Woodburn, Mr. Chairman. One thing I was just thinking about, and actually after our meeting yesterday, is that, and it ties into the Centralina as the implementation manager, is that as it unfolds, there are probably levels of interaction in different regions. And actually, in some cases, and I'm thinking about Anson County in particular, may have to get involved to help us determine different options that we may want to take in certain cases. We don't know right now what those are. We won't know until we get there. So I think that's going to be critical as the Centralina as the implementation manager portion of it.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Jarvis.
Are there any objections from our executive board about pursuing motion option B? Does anyone have any concerns about that? Because I think from a staff perspective, that's our preference, but we defer to you all in terms of what you feel will be more comfortable for yourselves as well as your fellow delegates.
I feel that'd be the way to go, Geraldine, from the standpoint of what you just said when you were answering my question and concern. So someone needs to step up. And I think folks in our region are okay with this. They'll look at it in a favorable manner, but they're going to look at each other. We're all going to look at each other thinking who's going to step up and be the leader for this. And I think it's going to be us as the implementation manager. If anyone doesn't agree, then please, we can talk about this. But motion A is just, yes, we like the recommendations, but it needs to go one step further. I think that's what motion B states. Are you okay with that? Jason, Michelle, got the information you need?
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
great.
Thank you.
I think so. So I think we just had one more slide, and that's just that final path of sharing some of the calendar items. So I mentioned the county briefings that are going on right now, and really appreciate the chance to check in with everyone now at this stage. Our last joint advisory committee meeting, which several of you are participants on for the project, will be the 29th, where the final draft plan will be shared. And as Geraldine mentioned, this will also be out on the street next Monday. Remember, the recommendations, which are the vast bulk of that information or the plan, have been out since July. So this really is that additional detail that for those that have been in positions like yourselves will probably be mostly old news. You know, a lot of the context that you've already heard, but for others that maybe are less familiar, this will be good to see on Monday. And that's when the plan will be released or shared with the Joint Advisory Committee at their final meeting, the 29th. Of course, the Centralina Board of Delegates, and then our partners in this project, CATS and their policy board, the Metropolitan Transit Commission, will also receive this in October. And then finally, where we see a lot of the work happening is with the MPOs, where you each have representation locally in sub-regionally. So this is where each MPO will be able to take the information and move forward in their traditional fashion, whatever that might be. For some, it may be a resolution. For others, it's incorporation into their long-range plans, you name it. But that's where we believe a lot of work will get done. So that's kind of the high-level path for endorsement. I also, I guess, want to share several sites. One is the project website you've seen many times. The other is the recommendations website, where you can post your comments to those recommendations. And then the third is something that we've alluded to and mentioned and played a big part in the overall work we've done, but that is the equity. It's called the Equity Portal. So this is a accumulation of data and information that you can use through an online mapping tool to zoom into your neck of the woods and see what's going on across several different data layers and kind of take a look at what equity issues might be at play in your local area. So I'm sure we can probably put this out as well, Kelly, through the notes afterwards, but wanted to share all those items. So I think that's about it. Michelle, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I think we're good, and we're looking forward to October.
Good. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Jason. If everyone notices, important dates coming up with the September 29th. Again, the huge date of our delegate meeting, October 13th. And then October 27th is the Metropolitan Transit Commission endorsement. And then November and December with the regional acceptance. So huge dates coming up, but everybody please be aware of the October 13th date. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle and Jason, for all your work. Any further comments or questions before we move on from the executive board? If not, thank you again for all your hard work. It's been a long process, a lot of work by you folks. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, now we'll move to our last item, item 7. And I hope everyone looked at their agenda packet and went through this thoroughly, because this is big. Centralina office space discussion and decision. Executive board is asked to make a determination regarding Centralina's future office location. Turn it back over to Geraldine Garner, and I think we have the Cushman and Wakefield folks on the line with us, whether it's Keith or Piers or both, and look forward to hearing from them also. So Geraldine.
Thank you. We have both Keith and Piers with us, but you'll be hearing primarily from Denise and I tonight, and they're there for any questions and technical resource as we sort through this. First of all, I just want to apologize for the late arrival of the slides. I know some of you like to prepare in advance for these conversations and read through the materials that we put together. With good reason, it was delayed. We were doing some last minute negotiating and back and forth, which contributed to the delay, and we'll walk that through in just a moment. I'm not going to spend time today going through each of the properties. We sent a lot of information out in your packet. This is the summary of what we have in front of us today in terms of options. So I'll briefly recap that, and we'll just pause if there are any questions for clarification on the building amenities, location, office suite characteristics. We're going to cover the financials in a moment. So, but just as a recap, our one option is to stay here at our current location. You can see the details here on the screen. Another option is to move just up the road to another office park called Resource Square in building number 4. A third option is to move a little bit down the road, but still on the edge of the research park, to a property called The Grove at Cliff Cameron Drive in the corner of W.T. Harris. And the last option is to go to McCullough Drive in the University Executive Park Complex, which is closer to the Lynx Blue Line. So I'm just going to pause here. If there are any questions about the building amenities, the location, the office suite characteristics from the board that I can answer.
Any questions? Yes.
I'm sorry, Bobby. This is William. You know, you and I and Jay and Jarvis and others, we went through, I think, all 4 of these. Geraldine, did we go through McCullough University Executive Park?
We did not. That was added because they changed the space on us of which one was available. So you did not see that.
You know, I don't want to be oversimplistic, but the staff needs a lot of weigh-in, I think. Senior management needs a lot of weigh-in. I think the board ought to be supportive as to what staff thinks is the best location for them. I can tell you that the resource office that I went to, I was very impressed with. I was very pleased with. So, you know, I don't want to come out of the gate with any kind of recommendation, but while we are here to be supportive, I also think that this decision should be made from senior management as to how business flows. I mean, we're not there on a day-to-day basis. We don't see how you interact. We don't see how things flow. And I would defer to what your recommendation would be. Giving financials, if it's not exorbitant, if it's not out of the realm of possibility, if it's what we're used to spending or what we can justify spending, I would support that. So, you know, I'm coming out of the gate with that, not necessarily to stop you from making a presentation for all 4, but just saying that if we don't trust our staff, then we have a problem. And they have evaluated this, and I would be more than happy just to jump right to what the staff recommendation would be.
Well, I appreciate that trust and your faith in the process, and I'm still going to walk everyone through the process that we went through and the conclusion that we came to. I wish it was a very simple, cut and dry decision where there was a clear runway path to an answer. This was probably one of the most complicated business decisions I've ever had to make. There are so many angles to this, and there wasn't 100% consensus. So I think the recommendation you're going to get from me is the best one that I can make with the information that I have available and given input that I've received from the staff committee and from our directors. So with that, I'm just going to jump right in. So these are the 3 lenses in which I'm looking at the recommendations, or we're looking at the recommendations. The first is financial feasibility. You can see the different components there. It's not just the lease, it's also how much a move costs, furniture, construction within the building, et cetera. The other is the quality of environment. So which option provides us with a great work environment with amenities and building appearance, safety at the location, et cetera. And then lastly is our needs as an organization. So we've got a lot of challenges with adapting to hybrid work currently, but there may be tomorrow's challenges that we do need to face. And so we need a office suite and a footprint that's going to be flexible and easy for us to navigate. So some initial headlines. We've eliminated Grove number 5 from consideration, although I'll show you the analysis as we go through the presentation. It's the cheapest, but it just does not meet our organizational needs or provide a quality of environment. And I think those of the executive board that viewed it, it wasn't great. Unfortunately, there was not 100% consensus from everybody on the remaining options. There was a strong contingent of staff and directors who want to remain at this location, but with the caveat that it needs some significant improvements. And then there was also a group that felt very strongly about the amenities and the opportunities to build a new work environment at Resource 4. Regardless of the location, costs are going to go up. We got a very cheap initial rent when we moved in here five years ago. So our escalation is anywhere between 3% and 19% compared to what we pay today. So just being clear on that, there is no less expensive option than today's costs. And Denise will walk you through the financials. We did, given the fact that the current location and Resource were kind of the top staff picks, we went back and did more due diligence with those landlords. Keith and Piers were burning the midnight oil, getting best and final offers up until 2 p.m. today from those locations. So I feel really great. We've got a great deal. Finances for those two are kind of out of the equation since they're both very similar in terms of what it means for our bottom line. Our challenges is that we're just going to have to work with the space that we have. We've got a lot of staff needs, department needs that are very unique. We're not one organization in terms of working one way. We're a mosaic of unique needs that we need to find a space that we're honoring. And then lastly, it's really important to me that we don't have winners and losers and sort of the space wars, that we've got, a little bit of equity in terms of offering all staff access to great high quality spaces. And for those of you who've been in our current facility, we've got our aging department has a really great setup. They're very comfortable there. On the other side of the building, it's a different situation. So that's one of the main things we would have to address. We did a lot of staff engagement, culminating in a survey that we released last week. I sent them the packet that I sent you. We didn't ask them to vote for a particular property. We asked them about certain qualities and dimensions of the space and how they would want to work. You can see here some of the themes that came out of that survey. The uniqueness of our departments, need to honor that and design for that. The fact that some departments feel like they've had a bad deal here. One of our staff members described working in a dungeon, just in terms of not having access to light, natural light, and openness. There was some skepticism about the use of the light rail. So that was the feature of the McCullough Avenue property. And I know that was a great interest for the board the last time we talked about this. A lot of staff wouldn't use it. And there was some skepticism as to whether or not our stakeholders would as well. You can see here some of the amenities that were important to staff. And we did ask whether or not folks would work in a smaller workstation in exchange for having more flexibility in building amenities and teaming space. And there was some appetite for that, but then there was also a large group, it was roughly equally split, that wanted to retain their current workspace and work size. In terms of the director level discussion, I really appreciated all of our directors' engagement and support of the overall decision. I feel that we're very united in the fact that we're going to approach this decision and ultimately what you guys decide in a way that's going to work well for everyone and kind of leaning into the opportunity. But moving is challenging overall, but we are going to have to, as an organization, tackle our new workplace etiquette, with half the people around you being on Zoom calls, wearing earphones, and other folks trying to do quiet heads down work. It's very complicated. And I'm sure a lot of your staffs and your communities are facing similar challenges. So you can see some of the other director feedback here, but I think all of us we know no space is going to be perfect. So we're just trying to find the best space that can provide a really high quality work environment for everybody. So we did a little straw poll. This is the results here. So we're kind of, it wasn't an even number of representation in our departments. We don't currently have a CED director, and Denise and I abstained from really voting, but you can see here how the two spaces are really kind of neck and neck. Here's just an analysis, a visual analysis of the quality environment factor. You can kind of see mapped to each location, green being good, yellow being okay, and red just not being great. I think from the factors seen here, building appearance, amenities, accessible location, and the safety and amenities of the immediate environment, David Taylor Drive at Resource 4 has a lot of positive attributes to it. Again, Cliff Cameron Drive is not really in the running. Our current office space has some really good features and has served us well, but not as great in comparison to Resource 4. And McCullough Drive does have some strengths, but some concerns as well. In terms of organizational needs, again, Grove is not cutting it. It's out of contention. McCullough does have a little bit bigger square footage, so it has some flexibility for us to design to meet our needs, and some challenges too in terms of potential for growth and being in an office park location and not having on-site property management. So really what it comes down to is our current space and resource. And I think with both there's trade-offs. In order to really get this building the way we want it, we're going to have to make some significant capital investments. And as Denise will walk you through in a moment, I just don't know if that's a good use of our resources. I think we can go to a space where the landlord is going to pay for that for us, and we're paying to upgrade certain things where we need it, but it's more strategic instead of, ripping out walls here and doing things that we probably should have done when we upfitted the place in the first time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Denise to run you through some of the financial data and assumptions.
So, hello. So I was just going to go over some information on our fund balance, first of all, because initially there will be a significant amount of cash outlay. So far this year, going through our audit for the fiscal year ending 21, we are expected to increase our fund balance by about $430,000, which is really good. But a lot of that increase is due mostly because of less operating costs due to the pandemic. So it's not the norm, but we have done well over the last couple of years in increasing it. And this definitely gave us a bit of a cushion in our fund balance and cash flow. For the after fiscal year ending 21, our total fund balance will be up over $1 million, up at $1,337,000, which I just went back because we had discussions a couple years ago about our fund balance, and this will be the highest it's been in the history. So with that being said, that does give us some current cash on hand that we haven't had in the past, of roughly about $500,000, conservatively speaking, which goes to be able to support some of this initial cash outlay that will be incurred with moving costs and construction costs. So some of the budget assumptions we have is with the interior uplift or construction costs of the building. The newer buildings, or the buildings other than this location, will do a build out for a turnkey move-in based on the floor plans we give them, meaning they're a clean slate. They will put in the walls, carpet, basic amenities, and anything above that, then we will have to pay for. So we were thinking, or we budgeted roughly $100,000 for those additional costs, which will be the construction costs on the other buildings. And that's to cover things like glass glass walls on the offices to let natural light flow, and different items. So in order to be fair and compare all the buildings the same, trying to look at the current location, and we could add $100,000 into construction costs, but that really, with this location, would not change much of a footprint on it. But we put it all into all considerations in calculating out the cost. We based our move costs on the last time we had moved, and that was $75,000. So we increased it 15% for inflation. But we would have to get estimates on that. Furnitures and fixtures, we estimate will be about $150,000 for 52 cubes and 7 private offices, along with conference room, breakout lobby. That was based on the middle of the line, you know, not the cheapest, but not the most expensive. With that, also taking into consideration, you know, if we stay here, aging has replaced a lot of their cubicles, so that would be cost saved. I think Resource 4 has cubicle walls for approximately 40 cubicle spaces, which could save roughly $20,000. So we were taking that into consideration for our budgeting purposes. So overall, that comes to about $300 and some thousand for that cost. And as Geraldine mentioned, regardless of what we do, our cost is going to increase. The proposal that we have here gives us a 15% increase over what we currently pay. Resource 4 was 17%, McCullen was 7%, and Grove was 3%. Now, they went back and David Taylor had done for this Broadcom location, they did a new proposal. And with that being said, comparing us to Resource 4, there is within a 1% difference in total cost. And that's including the rental over the life of the agreement and construction costs. So the current location is 7% over McCullen and 5%, and Grove is 10% less. So I have McCullen 7% less, sorry. So this brings you to just a lot of data, the square footages, the effective rent rates, monthly cost, and construction, total cost with construction. Initially, when I looked over this, I was, you know, more on the McCullen Drive just because financially it looks more suitable. But then there was things that kind of changed that, just with the area and other means. And I will admit, originally I was not so much for Resource 4 just because of financially, but after going back and negotiating, going through some different numbers, it's definitely in there in the running and can be a good move. I think there's a lot of value to come out of that building. One thing that makes a big difference in the cost is the construction cost. For the construction cost to stay here, you know, I estimated $200,000, but that still doesn't get us where we want for a building with the amenities or the footprint on the inside compared to the other places that are closer to 300. But with that being said, they're also investing $500,000 and $600,000 into the building to set it up how we would like to have it laid out. So does anybody have any questions on any of this or want more information?
Any questions from the board on the financials before we get to the recommendation?
Just one question, and you know, I've never asked a question that I didn't know the answer to, but from the square footage from where we are currently at 16,693 to Resource 4 at 12,900, you know, it's about a 15% decrease. Is it more efficient space? Are we happy with that? Can we make that work?
We have arguably too much space here. It's not very efficient. So moving into the resource space would be shoring up some of that efficiency, but it would also be downsizing the size of individual workstations and offices. There is some flexibility on that floor to increase our square footage a little bit more if we wanted to. But I think one of the things that we're taking into consideration is that on the first floor of that building, there's a brand new tenant amenity center with flexible seating. There's a fully outfitted conference room facility for 50, 2 additional conference room spaces for about 15, and an outdoor seating area. So there's lots of square footage that's not in our lease that our staff would have access to. And so it's reducing the personal square footage to have access to those other amenities, which again, kind of speaks to a different way of working and a different level of flexibility than what we're used to. And
I appreciate that. Thank you. Denise, the annual escalation at resource 4 at 2.5%, that's very reasonable. But, you know, is there any consideration maybe to tying that to the regional CPI? You know, if maybe we're at 2% versus 2.5%, is there any appetite on their part to tying it to what's regional as opposed to just plain old CPI?
So I'm going to call on Keith or Piers who are with us that can provide that insight.
Sure, this is Piers speaking. So 3% are what are considered market escalations across Charlotte office product. Often when you go to a 7-year lease term, there's a little bit of added flexibility, but 2.5% is about as low as of an escalation as we'll see in any office building across Charlotte.
Okay, thanks, Piers. I was just, you know, looking at what we're seeing here north of Charlotte, and we tie it to regional CPI. So it may be pennies, but just a thought.
Yeah, these landlords really like to get rid of that flexibility for them. It's important to them to be able, from a valuation perspective, if they go to sell in the future for underwriting purposes. So having known quantities is a value to them. And again, this is very low for market. So the fact that they've gone this low is impressive.
Thanks, appreciate that.
So just in summary, some closing thoughts. Our current office space, it's familiar, it's functional for some. We would need to make an investment here to make it functional and better for the majority of all the staff. What we can afford to do may not meet expectations. And we're also investing our cash in an asset that we don't own. So from a long-term perspective, that's something to consider. The other thing too is that we just don't know what the construction costs might be. So it could open up, you know, into Denise will make us stick to the budget, which we will, but it may not get us where we need to go. Resource Square, number 4, you know, top quality environment. There's an opportunity for all of us to design to our department's needs. The landlord is paying for the majority of the construction. So that $100,000 that Denise plugged into the budget, we may not come anywhere close to spending that. It really just depends on where we end up with the final floor plan design and how much above the building standard we might need to go. It is a smaller footprint, but we're not paying for shared spaces in our lease, but we can certainly access them. And McCullough Drive, you know, we haven't really talked that much about it. It's workable. It has a good value, but I have pretty significant concerns about the immediate environment in terms of safety and accessibility, and some questions on whether or not some of the amenities that look good on paper would actually be used by staff if they're not located in the building and you have to walk to them, and the light rail was not as appealing as we had thought. So what does that mean? So taking all this into consideration, I'd like to recommend to the board that we pursue lease negotiations with Resource 4. And I'm happy to answer any questions or dig into this more.
Any questions for Geraldine, Denise Strasser, who's our finance director, and then William Morgan has spoken, who is our treasurer, and of course, Pierce from Cushman Wakefield is on the line. Any questions for any of those individuals regarding the meat and potatoes of this process?
I don't have any questions, but based on what I've heard, it appears that this is although it's not a clear-cut majority from anybody that was involved in making the decision, that this is the best choice, and I'm good with it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Given a broken conversation, staff has spent a tremendous number of hours looking at this. The executive committee looked at all of this, and I think, again, as I said, this should be a decision that's made by staff. So it appears that Resource 4 seems to be the premier space. So with that said, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I'm too early, but I would make a recommendation that we empower staff to begin negotiations on 10735 David Taylor Drive on Resource 4 for our new office location.
Second, Eggleston.
We have a motion. We have a second by Councilman Eggleston. Any discussion on the motion? The motion is to direct executive director to begin lease negotiations at 10735 David Taylor Drive, Resource 4. Bring a legally reviewed lease to the executive board for approval at their November 2021 meeting. That's the motion on the table. Any discussion?
I second the motion.
Thank you. And I'll just make a comment. I agree with what's been said. In making notes, I have looked at each location. Safety was a huge concern. Sometimes you don't go the cheapest route if there's safety issues. I've looked at this location here where we currently are, and you're right at the street, Resource 4. That's a wash because they're just in the same area. And I do have a map, and I don't have it of all the employees that work here, but I have some in travel distance where they work to drive from home. And this is centrally located. I look at safety. I look at the needs of the organization, and I look at workspace efficiency. And I agree with what's been said so far. That would be Resource 4 at 1073 David Taylor Drive. We have a motion. We have a second. I will ask Kelly Weston to call the roll to get others to get a yes or no and see if this passes. Kelly Weston.
Peter Rashudo,
Yay.
Loris Chambers, Bobby Compton,
Yes.
Kathy Davis,
Yes.
Larkin Eggleston,
Yes.
Jean Halp, Jay McCosh,
Yes.
William Morgan,
Yes.
Troy Selberg, Lynn Shu,
Yes.
Jennifer Stepp,
Yes.
Amelia Stinson Wesley,
Yes.
David Williams,
Yes.
Jarvis Woodburn.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion did pass.
Thank you, Kelly. Sounds like unanimous, and thank each and every one of you as Centralina staff and especially our executive board for your due diligence in looking over this over the last few months. We've been discussing it. Looks like we'll have a new home come first of the year, houses up, everybody's gonna
April.
work. Hey, well, okay, next spring, we'll have a new home, okay, and more to come regarding that.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes our agenda items. We now will go to comments, and we're slightly ahead of schedule. Comments from the executive board or Centralina staff. Any Centralina staff still on the line, or any board member, please comment. Anything you'd like to share with us? If not, any comments from our executive director?
None. Thank you.
Okay, none. Thank you. Thank you. Again, Geraldine Gardner and her staff for all the work regarding this. Cushman and Wakefield staff, if you're still with us, thank you so much. You've been involved with all of Centralina's moves over the years, and we appreciate that. My comments, I have several here, so please bear with me. On our October Board of Delegates meeting, it'll be the next and final 2021 meeting of the Board of Delegates held on Wednesday, October the 13th at 5 o'clock. As of now, this meeting will be held in a hybrid format with both in-person and virtual attendance options. That's as of now, as something worse happens. And so I'm not sure Kelly get the word out because we'll need a head count on that as how many we're going to be allowed in here with spacing and so on. At that meeting, the board will be asked to take action on the Connect Beyond plan that was discussed this evening. And thank you, Michelle and Jason, for all that. I encourage each delegate to read the plan, talk with Centralina staff, share your feedback this month. It's essential we have a quorum at the October meeting to take this critical action. You saw the dates that Michelle and Jason stated. It's going to be happening in this month, our meeting next month, and what's going to happen in November, December. It's very critical. From the strategic plan subcommittee, if you'll recall in the June executive board meeting, we established an ad hoc subcommittee to help champion the new regional dialogue stakeholder engagement series and to help set the framework for Centralina's next 3-year strategic plan. We have formed the subcommittee, and the members are Council Member Corinthia Lewis Lemon from the town of Morven, Council Member Troy Selberg, town of Harrisburg, Commissioner Pedro Mori, town of Waxhaw, Commissioner Elaine Powell, Mecklenburg County, Council Member Christine Poinsett, City of Lincolnton, Mayor Miles Atkins, town of Mooresville, and Chair of the Centralina Economic Development District Board, and of course myself. Thank you, subcommittee members, for your willingness to serve on the subcommittee and support this process. The first meeting will be held later this month. Again, thank you all. I didn't have to go out and pick anybody. All the other names came right in, so I really appreciate that. On the annual aging conference, the Centralina Area Agency on Aging is excited about their upcoming virtual conference this year to be held on Friday, October the 1st. Aging has enjoyed an in-person conference for over 20 years. Is looking forward to expanding the event's audience in this safe and virtual format. The conference will feature 12 quality workshops throughout the day from local, state, and national speakers, along with the session speaker, Kenyon Salo, who will speak about the bucket list life. We all have a bucket list. Aging hopes to host many attendees at the conference from across the region and beyond. For information and to register, please visit centralinaaging.org. And with this, William Morgan's birthday, and he's a little bit older, he may need to log on to centralinaaging.org for more information regarding his birthday and his age. This is something that's very important to me because I did it, and maybe some of you others have too. The Charlotte Aviation Academy, the next CLT Aviation Academy class being planned for January and February of 2022. The purpose of the Aviation Academy is for public sector, private sector, community leaders to better understand Charlotte Douglas International Airport and its contributions to the community and region as the biggest economic driver in the region. The Aviation Academy aims to offer an interesting mix of presentations from subject matter experts and behind the scenes look at operations, planning, safety, and security, and the complex systems at CLT. The competitive application period for the 2022 class will open in early October and close before Thanksgiving. Please contact Emily Parker, eparker@centralina.org. Emily Parker at eparker@centralina.org. The questions and more details. And then I took this a couple years ago, I think when it first came out. It's one of the best things I've ever done because, as I mentioned, it's the largest economic driver in our region. And of course, I live in Mooresville and Iredell County, and that Charlotte Airport is huge for us. That's one reason we grew 53% from our last census to this census, and that airport is a major reason for that. And so we're very appreciative to the city of Charlotte and that airport for what we've done. And I'm talking about, we go behind the scenes, air traffic control tower. We, all through a little bus ride around the whole place. It is really cool. And so I suggest to apply early, get with Emily, apply early. And I'll give you a little hint. If you're on the executive board, you might have a little insight, you might have a little inside track to get on this thing. And I'll speak to Emily regarding that, get our executive board involved if you haven't done it. So please take an interest in that. And with no other questions or comments, and we are pretty much right on time. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month in October. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.